Hola, hola. I am Trek with two Ks,
And I am 3D, and welcome to Metaverses The Other Side.
brought to you here on the Gentlemen of Crypto Network. Just a heads up, this episode is before we had the idea of bringing the Twitter spaces to the Gentlemen of Crypto Network. And so that's why we're talking about the stuff that we're talking about in this episode. World, like,
It really just goes to like more.
how do you deal with, like, you want to, like, where does the well, we need to make money stop, or does it even have to stop? Because, like, I remember somebody said, who was it, I forgot who it was, but it was something along the lines about like how capitalism like knows no bounds or something like that. So, like, you could basically sell anything. And then, like, when you look at the world that we live in, we fucking sell water, we sell air, you know what I'm saying? Like, we we sell hope, we sell hate, we sell any and everything that someone can find a way to make a monetary gain on. We sell it. So it's like, arguably, in the business world, are they wrong for doing this? And would other companies be wrong for following this particular model?
Bro, I don't think they're wrong for doing this. Like, the thing that I think is the 2 points that I would say they are in the wrong for is they have originally said the original OGL could not be revoked. And they're not revoking it, but they're denying full access to it, period. That should not have ever been done because even when the people who created it originally said it was for the people, not for them, and they should keep that one in that retrospect. But that also means that people should be able to still use it. It's a license that exists. It should be usable, not completely denied access in any form, even to new content. The second thing I think they're doing wrong is some of the terminologies that they're going for. Like if it was just creatures they invented, lands they created, sure. But even the last, I think, one or two manual book sets that they release every so many years, their new edition, like 5E and 4B, I think it was, they didn't even produce those books. Everything in those books came from the community. And then they just basically put their name on it and took a cut of the revenue. Like, they didn't even have anything to do with the production, the producing. Any bit of it has nothing to do with them. Like, you go into the 5E book and look in the credits, and they're in there, but all the other people, if you start searching them up, you're going to realize all the other people in there are just, they are people in the space. They don't work for Wizards of the Coast. They don't work for Hasbro. They don't work for D&D. And so technically, in my mind, is they don't deserve rights to that kind of stuff because they actually had nothing to do with it. Now, if they was to say, look, you can't use the D&D, you can't use the dragon logo that's been invented for us, or there's the 6 of them that's been invented for them, sure, that would make sense. But they are basically monetizing the labor of someone else to help the brand awareness of it, because if they had never released that first OGL, D&D would have died in the like 93 to 96 era where everybody was trying to kill it because it has devils and demons and satanic stuff and all this other medieval style stuff. Um, it would have died then if it wasn't for the OGL. And so what I'm saying is, like, if they continue on the way they wanted the OGL to, they're going to kill themselves. The only way you're going to know about Dungeons and Dragons is you're going to see stuff on TV that says something about D&D or has dragon, but you won't actually hear about it. And for a lot of people in the normal space, they don't ever hear about Dungeons and Dragons. Like, when you pointed out to me that this thing was going on, I was actually a little bit in shock and awe that they were still producing manual scripts and manual books, and because Pathfinder, was like a 10 times better version, and then there's a bunch of other ones. But I have to also admit, this whole scenario caused innovation. It caused people to almost decentralize the tabletop gaming systems now.
Okay, on that note, you gave me the great segue, bro. I want to definitely like clap hands. I wish I knew. If I wish there was a sound thing that I could do right now for this. Like I'm dead
You need an
ass.
iPhone for that.
I'm not running on an iPhone for this. That's like I gotta go look. I would have to go look for it. But nonetheless, I want to give a shout out and like a salute to 3D because the other day he hits me up and he's like, "Yeah, so I made this thing. It's the ICS," and I was like, "What's this? ICS? Okay." And he's like, "Yeah, you can make a character with it, and you can do this, this, and this, and this, and this." And I'm like, "All right, what is he talking about?" So I go and I look. People, I don't think y'all understand how smart this dude is. And I tell him hands down, he's one of the smartest people I know in this space. I don't know how long it took him to make this. All I know is he was able to put together a joint that would work to be able to make a Dungeons and Dragons character on the site that is decentralized in regards to being hosted on IPFS, and you can build the character and based on like all of the metrics and stuff. So like strength, agility, and all the other things that go into building those types of characters, and you can keep a copy of it digitally. Like, I'm just saying, kudos to this man. I don't think y'all understand like his aptitude, and I be really trying to like get people to understand like, yo, my guy's working on this thing. Hopefully I can figure out something to like get him more accoutrements for his hard work and his ingenuity. He really is a smart dude, and he can execute. That's the other part of it. Like he's the thing of we're not just talking shit about like decentralization and like digital sovereignty and economic sovereignty. Like we're actually doing shit and playing with the tech. I don't know how many times I gotta say that. And like this dude is creating and breaking and creating and breaking and creating better stuff and new stuff and things that like when I try to explain it to other people, they're like, wait, what? You sure he was able to do that? I'm like, yes. I just had to throw that in there because you said the thing that you said. But yeah, and at some point we're going to do a whole video run through and have it on the Metaverses the other side, on the YouTube side, so you can watch the video play out that way. He also did do a breakdown the other day on Twitter. Was that the vlog joint? I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, I got a Twitter live on there.
Yeah, so I'm just saying, the man does some interesting things, and that was one of them. And you were working on it before I started telling you about the OGL thing, or did this start during the OGL thing?
Before, I had a VTuber come up to me and ask if I could build something like this to make it easier for them to play their version of Dungeons & Dragons online. Basically, them and some other VTubers, what they do is they just take their VTuber information and they put it into character sheets. Then they play an anime version of Dungeons and Dragons with their VTubers, and they just wanted to basically like hand cameras or hand cams are now not allowed on Twitch unless you're cooking, and they kind of got put in a rock and a hard place. They can't share their character sheets, and if you don't know, using PDF stuffed editors are not the best, and not everyone can always use them. So that's how I started this. Was they just wanted an they wanted a sheet that they could stream, so just a digital sheet. And then when this OGL came out, it went from just being a character sheet that had all sorts of fucking options and could be stored in a manner that could be shared. It went to an interactive character sheet, and I've just been going like I have gone ham. I think I have missed sleep like multiple days. I just pushed and pushed and pushed to take it from a really expansive character sheet to a fully automated character sheet. Like I'm actually in the process right now because the VTubers that I was doing it for, there's an output error when you go to save it on itty bitty site, and so the whole screen is shifted to the right by like 30 VW video width, and I can't get to shift back. So they dropped out. But I'm like, well, F it. I can still do stuff. And now I'm building a bounty and warrant bounty and wanted system, and a basically like a journal log, so that way you can like take notes while you're in game that only your character has, or you can actually set up a bounty for one of the characters in the game, and then you'll be able to send it as a wanted poster to another person who can then import it into their sheet and show up and be able to open it and say, hey, look, here it is. And other things that will be able to take that same concept the original VTubers wanted and brighten it up. And that's why, like, when you hit me up about this, I was like, what the fuck? How? It just like the timeline of events. Like, I've probably been working on this for like 3-4 months here and there, and then this came out, and I was just like, I looked at the timeline. I had 6 days to be able to take it from static to non-static, and I actually missed the timeline by 2 days. It took me 8 days to do it, but thankfully the OGL didn't finalize within that timeline like it was supposed to.
And so, if y'all don't understand, if OGL2 would have happened, this, like, all of the work he would have done at any point down the road when what 3D created came up on their radar, they could have just been like, yo, either you're going to totally cut that whole thing down, which, I mean, how would you have done that now because it's out on IPFS, or we're just going to end up suing the shit out of you and, financially ruin you and whatever. But, like, that didn't happen. So as it looks right now, 3D is good to go. But the other idea of, like, there are other people who are doing things within the gaming sector along this lines, as well as there are people who are doing things within the metaverse stuff. Me and 3D have been talking about some other things that we want to try to do with the metaverse stuff that arguably nobody's doing right now. But again, like, we're playing in a derivative of the Minecraft ecosystem. And so there are some questions for how we want to move forward. What will we be responsible for? What are we not, quote, responsible for? How much, quote, permission do we need? Or, like, if we can do it without, quote, asking for permission, would that still have a negative repercussion down the road when we get this thing to work? And I know I'm not saying what it exactly is, but it is involving metaverses, and it is doing something very much different than what is being done in metaverses right now. But on that idea, like, it would still be one of those, like, we'd throw it out there and then we'll see, like, do people really care? Maybe not right now. We might just be ahead of the curve like we are on some of the other things that we've tried to do. But the point being is, OGL is not necessarily a threat to the future development of metaverses, but a OGL type license that could come out of either Decentraland. It could come out of even like a Second Life, even though, like, they're not really talking anything, NFT-ish metaverse just like that. Even Sandbox, voxels, like, because at the end of the day, I don't know how many folks are really paying attention to, like, how things are moving at scale within the technology of being able to generate a metaverse, as well as being able to store the digital assets that would be created within a metaverse. So you have it that the storage space is going down cost-wise. You have it that the ability to be a no-code or low-code type build, that's also scaling and accelerating more. Again, we have a website that we built called the Metaversal Toolbox, and it gives you those tools. Plus, there's another joint called, what's the other joint? Web3. Is it Third Web or Web3? One of those. But, like, they got their stuff on how they do it. We got our stuff on how we do it. Our stuff is all based off of, like, open source stuff, right? The point of what I'm saying here is the open source community is scaling to be a lot less technically inclined. And with that, it then brings the question in for businesses that or companies or whatever type of entities that are looking to move in this metaversal space, whether we want to call it VR or metaverses or the whole VX thing. They're going to have to figure out other types of revenue models. And because of the open nature of this technology, it doesn't necessarily work to use a revenue model where you're keeping your community or quote your users locked in, right? That model isn't sustainable as it was, let's say, 10 plus years back. Because if you've also noticed now, what X amount of places are doing is they're just reverting to the subscription model where they'll catch you on the monthly, which holds you as a steady user or at least as a steady source of income for quarterly and like quarterly periods, as well as looking at like the market cycles of like 6 month, 12-month stuff. But at the same time, the technology to be able to create these types of spaces, it's coming over on the free side. So what happens when the subscription model doesn't work anymore? You then have to find some other way as a business to generate your revenue. And if you have a hell of a ton of third-party creators who are coming up with better, let's say, more engaging platforms and environments and storylines and narratives, and better at the building of like the new community segment than what you are as a more traditional or longer established player. Again, think about how old D&D is. It's like 60 years old. That's more than 2 generations. If you don't know, a generation is 25 years. At this point, they can't, like WoC, Wizards of the Coast, they can't be considered a startup anymore. They're arguably a part of the establishment. So think about this in terms of what would Decentraland be in another, 10 years? At that point, they'd be around for nearly one full generation. If Decentraland made it for another 10 years, they'd be short of a full generation, but they'd be around long enough that like a kid could grow up and be like, oh, like Decentraland has always been there. The same thing for voxels, the same thing for Sandbox, the same thing for Uplift. I'm trying to think of Second Life is damn like, and I think another 5 years, Second Life has been around for at least a generation, right? The point being is the technology is scaling for accessibility, and the incumbent companies are realizing they have to change their revenue model because it's not sustainable for the technology and the new type of user that is now coming into age of this advancing technology. I believe the same thing applies to metaverses. Just saying. And I just want to say thank you to, what's that? Nuss Boy. Am I saying that right? Nuss. Yo, okay. I'm just going to say Nuss Boy. Thank you for coming in. We appreciate it.
Yo, so I want to point out that, for example, Sandbox has a game maker. They have assets creator for people to build stuff for their metaverse. And these types of creators we're starting to see more and more. Like there is a big one that's used, I believe, with either on Cyberspatial, I can't remember which one it is, where it's an avatar maker. It basically builds generic VRMs. And that character builder started off just for like a couple of things, and they're considered the Ready Player One version of the Ready Player One VRMs. And they first started off on just one platform, and then they kind of moved. And now they're talking about going off platform where you can actually download and upload VRMs to them. So what if I upload some of my VRMs to them so people can use it in spatial or on cyber or whatever they're actually connected to. I can't remember all the ones they're connected to. I know they're connected to like VR chat as well. What if I upload with them so that way people can use it and stuff? And then they come and they go, oh, well, there's this open gaming license that we have adopted, and we are now letting you know that you owe us up to 25% of your revenue if you made $1,800. And I'm literally throwing that one word out, 1,800 out there because VRM stuff, you don't. There's very few that make a lot of money in it, so it's needing a lower cost. But think of the concept. VRMs are real big in metaverses, and they're only getting bigger because they are the full 3D models. And well, that would kill things. And then at the same time, what if Sandbox puts in digital tags into the things you build, and then they can actually legally take you to court and say, look, you owe us money because you sold this on the secondary market, and we can see publicly on the blockchain you made $500,000, and we want 55% of what you got off that one sell because you used our asset builder to build the asset that you sold. I mean, it's the same thing. The OGL allows for those things to happen, and with it being a type of license, anyone can adopt the license, and basically all it does is just replace headers and names. Like, okay, so what assets do I have ability to charge you for, basically, and what words can I charge you for? Because a lot of the OGL, the new one, was about words. Like, that's the part that gets me the most. So much of it was just about words, not actually like assets or products or IPs, but words used around some of this stuff. Like, I think they had like specifically said strength, dexterity, and the way they use speed. Those are the three that pointed out to me because there's tons of games that use strength and dexterity and speed in their stats, especially in blockchain games like Splinterlands. Look at Splinterlands. They have all of those words that were mentioned are in Splinterlands games. Splinterlands also follows similar type game style of Magic the Gathering. Magic the Gathering is owned by Wizards of the Coast, which means whatever OGL is done with D&D, because it is Wizards of the Coast gaming license, because basically, in case you don't realize right now, the OGL that's being used on D&D is also being used in Magic the Gathering to an extent. Well, with this newer version, it would have been super restrictive, which means they probably would have fully adapted it with Magic the Gathering, meaning they would have more people, like basically people make cards, they'd be able to take advantage of that, and they would not have to worry about losing anything. But yeah, so that means that any of these companies that we're mentioning, any of these metaverses, because almost, I don't think there's any actually non-company based metaverse that exists. Like, they're all owned by a company, all of them. And that's the scary thing, is they all can take that and say, hey, you now owe us. And on some of these metaverses, you might have paid to get in the first place, and then there's a chance they might just flip the script and say, oh, now you owe us because we adopted this open gaming license.
Okay, speaking of that you said that. Oh, actually, let me jump back one. Housekeeping. One, this is Metaverses the Other Side. We do these spaces here on the Builder DAO account, which basically is an account on Twitter Spaces about building in metaverses. And me and 3D, we focus primarily on the Uplift metaverse, and we build and designed out plots and structures and all of that fun stuff. Other thing to note is that in 2 more weeks, we are going to have a conversation about this I want to say documentary. It's called We Met in, what is it? What did I say the name of the joint was, bro?
Give me a second, I'll go look.
I think it's like We Met in Live Stream or something like that. But basically, so if you don't know, first time listening to this, we had did a whole series on like different metaverse related movies, whether they were TV shows or movies or cartoons, and we were definitely going through the process of learning what we thought metaverses and virtual reality stuff was compared to how the entertainment industry presented it to us, versus what people in the spaces who joined us understood metaverses to be in relation to like movies. Like, example of Ready Player One, everyone thinks it's like the pinnacle movie of what virtual reality / metaverses should be, but it is definitely a shortcoming of what actually happens in the book, and arguably it's not even freaking 15% of the book as a movie. But the point being is, we did that for a while, and we're switching up the format on how we're going forward. This particular space today was generated off of this whole OGL situation happening, and we were actually supposed to start doing more of a news kind of format of discussion on, you know, different things happening in metaverses, not relation to speculative, you know, what's your token, what's your land price, blah 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 stuff, but actually like what's going on in the community, what's going on the tech side of it, who's doing what, and then the whole OGL thing started happening. But in another 2 weeks, because this is more towards February, but we want to get the announcements out now about it, is the documentary called We Met on
Virtual reality.
Okay, we met on virtual reality, and basically what someone did was they went around VR chat and they literally talked to different community segments within VR chat, and they had people explain like how they got into it, what have they been doing, who did they meet, how did it help them in life, like what was going on with them outside in the real world stuff. The point being is, if you paid attention to, or you know, tapped into how we were doing the commentary on the video, TV stuff, movie stuff, we had our like metrics of user experience, user interface, hardware, and overall metaversal experience to say like, are we at a 1 or 0 on whether what we saw in this program is what we have here in reality now. And when I seen it, I just happened to catch it because I was looking through something the other day, and I instantly like hit 3D up and was like, yo, we got to do something on this. I wish we would have found out about this particular joint sooner. But nonetheless, we're making the announcements about it now. I'm going to start throwing out some stuff on Twitter to talk about it. And I would really like to try to find some of the people who were actually in it, if not even the director person themselves, who did all the talking and interview stuff. But again, it's called We Met in Virtual, and I thought it was dope just on the end of like the interpersonal conversation and just like talking to people in the space while in VR. That's how the whole thing is happening.
Yeah, that's like a meta bro. It sounds really awesome and stuff, and if I'm sure Aramis might remember, there was a TV show on Second Life that only aired in Second Life, but it all was in Second Life. Like I remember one time, I think I was doing something, and there was people in an area, and they were all talking and stuff, and when you get close, you hear things, you see the chat, and people were just going nuts, and I was like, I don't understand. And then I went to a different spot in Second Life, and someone had their little thing up, like a basic screen with the link, and they were just broadcasting what they were doing in the other area there. And I was just like, okay, this is cool but weird. But this was also before Second Life was all high on meeting and dating, and it was more like people were, like we were building homes in Second Life back then. Anyone could build a home back then. Everyone got property just for joining, and so much has changed. And I think just looking at that fact, like Second Life used to be this open thing. And even when you watch The Office, they have scenes of a couple of the characters being in Second Life, and the versions of Second Life they're showing are actually really old. If anybody remembers, Attack of the Show went on Second Life and was building live. It was like actually building stuff on a property that was given to them for signing up. and they were trying to see how quickly they could get banned off of Second Life. And the first attempt took like 3 weeks. The second attempt took like for a few hours, and then got down to a point where they would start putting the logo anywhere and they'd immediately be banned. But it was just like that was so long ago. Everyone had property. Now you have to make purchases to get a plot for a home. The plots for buildings or businesses always was a pay system, but we're already seeing that, and that's legacy metaverse changing. I do know there's more subscription models than some of the older ones. Like I still like to play gay online, and it's starting to have that stuff in there. And you're right. Like when we see one thing do it, others follow suit. Like video games used to release 100% at full cost, and it was a fun experience. Now video games are subscription models that you still have to pay to get in the first place, and you don't even have the whole game when you get it. So it's just scary coming up.
Which then makes me wonder, for the blockchain related metaverses, who do you think might be the first one to hit to put up the paywall?
I think it's going to be Sandbox.
I can see that. I can so see that. Like, probably no later than like 2024. In my mind. No later than 2024. Like, and folks, again, like, we're talking about OGL, we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons, but this is not just a gaming thing. We're talking about the way that you use licensing agreements and the types of licensing agreements that can be applied in different industries and sectors. And for what we understand about how the tech industry and pretty much any kind of business usually operates, if you see another business do something and it has some appearance of either immense amount of money in it or like a good sustainable, or not even sustainable, I don't want to use the word sustainable, because pretty much everything has a cycle to it. Some cycles are longer than others, right? And so in the tech space, once one company does it, the next company picks it up too, and then sometimes they don't even do any tweaking. They just spit the same copy and paste thing out. And then we've seen how that worked out in the crypto space as far as smart contracts and what was going on during the whole build up to like yield farming and all of that. Like even for how you got Sushi Swap and what's the other one? Pancake. Like those were off of the same set of, like, the same people in the same clique. One was the professor, like one was the teacher. Literally, one was a professor, and the other one was the student. Like that's how that played out, and it went on the whole thing of like, all right, I'm gonna just copy and paste it and make my own. It is funny on the end of how forking something back in the day was like a good thing. But nowadays, like, it's not. I don't feel like it has the same. It doesn't have the same. I don't know what word. Excuse me. I don't know what word to use, but I don't feel it has the same. I feel like altruistic goal or nature is kind of wrong of the phrasing, but it. I feel like today's stuff isn't done for the same, let's say, right reasons. And I really don't feel like I know what to say the right reasons are now, just because I've seen so much from then to now where it's like, I even question some of the stuff back in the day if it was right. Like, anywho, yeah, like,
Bro,
yo.
I get what you're saying. Like, it used to be when you wanted to fork a project or fork a chain, it took effort, work, determination, trial and error, practice, skill. It was almost a skill set to be able to fork something, even if it was public and open source. Nowadays, it's like 3 clicks of a button. Like, I one time got stoned off my ass and on a cell phone, not even on a computer, but on a cell phone, made my first ERC-20 by going to GitHub and pushing 3 buttons in total outside of putting in my data. And I spent less than, I think I actually spent like less than 10 cents worth of Ethereum. I think before it was $1,000 even, to produce a coin that has less than one whole coin. And I don't even understand why why I did that, but I remember waking up the next day going, why am I missing Ethereum? And then I had these tokens, 39 tokens, and when I looked at it, there wasn't even a whole coin. It was a partial of a single coin, and it makes up the words 3D9 and by the code. So if you look at the max amount of the 3D9 token, the digits is hex for 3D9. And it's just like, why in the fuck would I do that? But that's the difference. You know, it used to be I would have to spend 3 months to fork Bitcoin for testing just to see if an idea would work, right? Now I can hit 5-6 buttons and be testing something that day, or even launch it with just one more click of a button. You know, like we have Infer and all these other things that just allow us to just like boom, 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 boom. And it's still like, though, if you want to do something unique, that's when it takes skill. That's when it's actually difficult. But for all the stuff that isn't unique, because we're seeing such a huge boom of it, I think me and you have become like desensitized to the ideal of, oh, I got another 10,000. I got another 10,000 unique NFT. I got another NFT. I got another staking farm, and all this other stuff. And it's like, it's just like, it's too easy, and no one's actually innovating on top of it. No one's going, well, how can I still reduce the block time and not increase the number of natural forks on the chain to where we have to mitigate consensus, every 4 or 5 days. We can get it down to where it's still within a week or 2 weeks, and how can I do this? Well, I don't have to reboot the blockchain like Binance Smart Chain has to do now every 24 hours, like all these little things. But that's where it lost the finesse of forking. Used to be very skillful. Now it's just, do it,
Yep. Yep and yep. I mean, yeah, it was something I was in the Telegram chat, and I threw out the question of like, hey, you heard what I said yesterday in the Wevolution spaces. So I asked that same question again, sorry, about like what makes a company a Web3 company. And all right, so backtrack for those of you who were not a part of yesterday's spaces or me and 3D's conversation around this whole thing, and what this relates to, because I definitely see in the next coming months the Web3 label being put onto gaming, where if you're doing this open source kind of community based derivative creator stuff, like, it's like, that's going to be an innovative Web3 company. That's a Web3 company. And like they're new age. And I feel like the way Web3 is being slung around right now, and folks don't even understand like what makes it Web3. And I asked a couple of other people this, and I'm like, all right, well, name me a company. Like, name me a company that's Web3 for what you think you understand about it. And then they started naming stuff. I'm like, nah, that doesn't count. Like, they were here in this year. Because they were because they were using blockchain, which I don't feel like, because blockchain as a technology has been around for so long, arguably longer than before the Bitcoin protocol came into the public view. I don't think blockchain as a technology should count to say something is Web3, because if that's the case, that means the Web3 industry has been around for longer than a fucking decade. That's what that is my rant sideways ramble. But I do hold to that. And in relation to this metaverse stuff and this OGL stuff and DNG and da da da, like I said, like I think that there's going to be a new push. Well, I didn't say this before, sorry. I think there will be a new push to bridge over the gaming industry changing their revenue model and it being under some kind of umbrella term of Web3. And blockchain related games as well as blockchain related metaverses are going to fall into the same thing. I'm going to be highly annoyed for probably the next 3 or 4 years while all of this gets worked out. But I do see this on the horizon as a developing thing, just because of how I see this whole Web3 thing going right now. And as me and 3D has said earlier, it isn't, we don't think that WoC and Hasbro are going to give up on doing some kind of update on the original OGL, which again, the other thing he pointed out was like the designers, the creators who made the original OGL agreement, their thing was about it being open and perpetual. And now, I don't know how, well, I know how, like people got lawyers, right? That's in question right now. Can something that is in writing saying it is perpetual in its function and nature as a contract, can you then take it back? And if that happens here's a question for you. If you made a contract, a smart contract, and then in the smart contract, there is a function that, or like, aside from the fact that you're saying, hey, this contract is supposed to be in perpetual operation, and then you write it in a way that it has perpetual operation and that it can fund its own gas and it can execute as it needs to, how do you take something like that back, especially if you're able to not have it like on a centralized server? Like, how would that work out?
All right, bro. I already know the answer because we had seen this. 2019, I think, is when we first saw this. There were people building smart contracts on Ethereum that said, "Hey, these are non-updatable contracts." And then one of them one day was updated. So there is such thing on blockchain as non-updatable contracts. That's a contract that has no connected private key. But that doesn't mean the person who originally built it didn't store the private key. And there is a way, which I don't know how to exactly, I just know like by the technology it should be possible to build a contract that owns its own keys. Like it has access to its own keys. So even if someone was to update it, it could reverse itself back to its original. I know technologically it should be possible. How? I'm not entirely too sure. And you'd probably be using IPFS for some form of indexing to make that happen. But yeah, we've already seen perpetual not be perpetual after all. And I think in the terms of like what WoC's lawyers were saying, perpetual is only within 35 years.
Yeah, okay, I forgot about that event. Yeah, okay, so we have the examples. Listen, folks, we don't want to take up too much of your time. We're already at like the hour and a half mark. And at a certain point, it just ends up being like rambling, right? Amiris, do you want to jump in and say anything? Hit us with a request real quick before we close out. All right, let's see. Anywho, housekeeping for the closeout. Again, this is Metaverses the Other Side. We do this on Thursday nights, East Coast time, 8 p.m. And we have the replay that goes on the Gentleman of Crypto Network, which is on the YouTube side of it. That has the whole video thing going on. And that is 11 p.m. on Fridays. What we've been doing is basically showcasing the plots that we've been designing and building in the metaverse space, which is on Uplift Metaverse. And we've also been exploring some other metaversal spaces too, such as voxels. I got to make the video for spatials, and there's a couple other places that I actually want to start like roaming around, just to show folks like there are different types of metaverses, and there's a whole bunch of different types of user interfaces and user experiences that you can have. And this is where we are right now. Like, this is Metaverses the Other Side. We're talking about like the non-speculative stuff, the stuff that like deals with more of the community and the techie aspects of the space. So yeah, so I guess she's just being a listener today. All right, well, nonetheless, this is the subject that we covered, the D&G OGL. Do we think OGL itself is an actual danger to metaverses or the future of metaverses? Not exactly, but some type of new open license or open source license for profit could be of a danger. Why? Because as we see, the technology is scaling and the user base and their technical astuteness is also evolving and changing. And so companies, businesses, and projects will have to figure out different types of revenue models going forward. That's going to be the driving factor in this whole thing. Will they have to do a revenue model that is similar to the OGL, or are they going to try to come up with something that might be even more draconian? We don't know. But so far, aside from what Microsoft is doing by Minecraft, we don't really see anything else in the space like that yet. But we do see on the horizon, there will be a metaverse, probably within the next 2 years, that puts up a paywall. Did I summarize it well? 3D?
That is definitely a good summarization, and definitely something I agree with and full-heartedly, as sad as it is. Since we're doing closeouts, I just want to point out it's the first Thursday in February that we'll be talking about We Met in Virtual Reality. So get that prepared and ready and get your notes going. I want to propose right now that maybe next week something we ought to consider is going over the definitions of metaverses and Web3, since it's been a while since we've done it, and we both have talked about in private how our perception of what these things are has changed just since we started Metaverses the Other Side here on Twitter. Now, Aramis, I hope we keep seeing you come in. We would like to have you more of a speaker. You have great input. We enjoy having you on the podcast with us. That's basically how this feels right now. So please show up again next week, because we're going to be having lots of fun talking about something, if anything, news cycles. And I did find one today, Trek, I'm going to have to send you away because it was a doozy. All right, everybody, thank you for coming in. And, people might take your cash, credit, or crypto, but we'll take your heart for free.